When you think of the NBA's top players of the 2010s, there's one defining characteristic that first comes to mind for each of them. When you think of LeBron, you think of pure dominance as a player who won 3 titles and made 8 consecutive finals appearances in the 2010s. When you think of Steph Curry, you think of his revolutionary play style, one that inspired millions to start taking threes. When you think of Kawhi Leonard, you remember his robotic, emotionless nature, one that brought him 2 NBA championships and a Defensive Player of the Year. But when you think of Kevin Durant, you can either go the positive route or the negative route. If you think of Durant positively, you'll remember him being one of the greatest pure scorers of all time. But if that doesn't come to mind first, there are probably 2 other things that do. The first being his jump to the 73-9 Warriors in 2016 after blowing a 3-1 lead to them in the playoffs, and the other being how in his career, he was always number 2. Number 2 to Greg Oden in the 2007 draft despite being named the Naismith Player of the Year in his only season at Texas. Number 2 to LeBron for almost a decade, including finishing second to LeBron 3 times in MVP voting despite putting up arguably better numbers. Number 2 to Steph Curry on the Warriors, despite winning 2 Finals MVP awards and being the best player in the league at that time. And now, despite putting up some of the best numbers of his career in the past few seasons, Durant has felt like an afterthought in basketball conversations to both older stars like LeBron and Curry and younger stars like Jokic and Giannis. So how did Durant become both a disrespected superstar and the league's biggest villain? And is there any way now for him to change that narrative? To get that answer, we need to go back to 2007, where Durant was selected second overall to the Seattle Supersonics. Durant showed an immediate impact on the floor, putting up 20 points a night on a team whose second and third options were 25-year-old Chris Wilcox and 30-year-old Wally Szczerbiak. And despite only winning 20 games his first season, Durant won the Rookie of the Year award, proving to everyone that the future was bright in Seattle, or after this season, Oklahoma City. The next season was again filled with disappointment, yet hope for the young Thunder team that drafted Russell Westbrook 4th overall. And after finishing with one of the worst records in the league for his second year in a row, the Thunder decided to take a swing on sophomore guard James Harden with the 3rd overall pick. And with this selection, along with progression from Durant, who made his first All-Star appearance and finished second in MVP voting, helped the Thunder become a 50-win team in the 2009-2010 season. But in the first round, the Thunder were bounced in 6 games by the eventual champion Los Angeles Lakers. The story of the first part of Durant's career was his unlimited potential. But now it was year 4, and after a breakout season for Durant and the supporting cast of Westbrook, Harden, and Ibaka, the expectations in OKC were high. And in the 2010-2011 season, the Thunder did not disappoint, finishing with 55 wins, with Durant leading the league in scoring for the second year in a row. But the true test was in the playoffs, as pushing the eventual champs to 6 games in their first playoff series made a lot of people optimistic toward their future. In the first round, the Thunder cruised through the Nuggets in 5 and just got by the grit and grind Grizzlies in 7 games in the second round before falling to the eventual champs, the Dallas Mavericks, in the conference championship. The following season was the infamous lockout season, where the Thunder finished with 47 wins, and Durant once again finished second in MVP voting to LeBron. And in the playoffs, OKC avenged their 2 previous playoff losses by dismantling Dallas and LA in the first 2 rounds before taking down the dangerous San Antonio Spurs in 6. And with that, Durant made his first NBA Finals appearance at 23 years old against his rival and the man he lost the MVP award to, LeBron James. But after the Thunder won the first game in this series by double digits, they lost the next 3 by 6 points or less, before losing by 15 in Game 5, ultimately falling to the Heatles 4-1 to lose the NBA Finals. It clearly wasn't the result OKC was looking for, but a result that made many, including myself, almost certain that the Thunder would win a title in the next 5 seasons. But what many of us didn't know was that this core would never win an NBA Finals, much less make it back. And it's all because the Thunder were cheap. After a breakout season from the Thunder, we would see the first of many what-if scenarios emerge in KD's career, where if things had gone differently, Durant's legacy would be remembered differently. And that what-if involves James Harden, the 22-year-old reigning 6th Man of the Year who looked poised to take another step forward and improve into one of the top scoring options on the Thunder. But heading into the 2012-2013 season, Harden was on the last year of his deal and looked for a max contract extension, or a 4-year deal for a total of $60 million. The Thunder's front office wasn't willing to give Harden that max extension because they already extended Westbrook, Durant, and Ibaka within the last 2 seasons and didn't want to go into the luxury tax, so they instead offered Harden a 4-year $55 million deal. But Harden did not budge from his initial demand and eventually requested a trade, which was granted. As a result, Harden was sent to Houston and became one of the best stars of the 2010s. And the Thunder got back Kevin Martin, who was off the team in a year, Jeremy Lamb, who was a disappointment in his 3 seasons at OKC, and 2 future firsts, one of which turned into Steven Adams. Now this is all hypothetical, but let's say OKC gives Harden the max deal and this young core stays intact. Does Durant and the Thunder win a title? Will Durant decide to stay in 2016? Does Harden ever become an MVP caliber player? We may never know the answer to any of those questions, but this is certainly a wrinkle to think about in the story of KD, who may have won a title and stayed in OKC if Harden stayed. But instead, Durant has to move along into the 2012-2013 season without Harden, where he again finishes second in MVP to LeBron, despite putting up a 28-8-5, shooting 50-40-90 from the field. This again is just another example of Durant finishing second to LeBron in the MVP award race, in the NBA Finals, and in player rankings. But Durant had a chance to take the crown from the King in the 2013 playoffs, as he led the Thunder to 60 wins. But he ultimately fell short in the second round as the Grit and Grind Grizzlies upset the Thunder, winning the series 4-1. Heading into the 2013-2014 season, all the pieces looked to fall into place for the Thunder, as Durant led an OKC roster that had a healthy mixture of young stars like Westbrook and Ibaka, and former champions in Derek Fisher and Caron Butler. And in 2014, Durant finally got over the hump and won his first MVP award, averaging a 32, 7, and 6 to lead the Thunder to 59 wins. So with the combination of the championship level pieces around him and the West looking weaker with the decline of the Lakers and Mavericks, things looked up for the Thunder's championship aspirations. But again, the Thunder lost in the conference finals to the eventual champion Spurs, making that the 4th time in the last 5 seasons that the Thunder lost in the playoffs to the eventual champions. The next season, Durant played only 27 games due to a Jones fracture in his right foot, and the Thunder missed the playoffs. So all of a sudden, KD and Westbrook went from the 21-year-old stars winning 50 games a season to the 27-year-olds who had a reputation for being the second best. So with 1 year left on Durant's contract and 2 years left on Westbrook's contract, along with the only true threat in the West being the Warriors, the Thunder knew this was a season to finally get over the hump and win a title. So in the 2015-2016 season, the Thunder went 55-27, finishing 3rd in the West. But with the further resurgence of Westbrook, who put up a 24-10-8 this season, and the emerging pieces like Steven Adams, Enes Kanter, and Dion Waiters on the team, the Thunder were one of the favorites to win the NBA title. And through the first 2 rounds, they looked great, dropping only 3 total games to the Mavericks and Spurs. This set up a conference finals matchup between the Thunder and the 73-9 Warriors. And through the first 4 games, the Thunder breezed by the Warriors to gain a 3-1 lead. But this is where it all went downhill. All the Thunder needed was 1 game, 1 win with one of the 3 best players in the league and a great supporting cast. But for some reason, they just couldn't get it done. And just as quickly as the Thunder gained a 3-1 lead, they lost it all, and the Warriors somehow made a 3-1 comeback in the Western Conference Finals, setting up the most iconic 3-1 comeback in NBA history. And here's where we get the second what-if in Kevin Durant's career. There were a lot of options for Durant in free agency after the 2016 season, including a return to the Thunder or a jump to the Spurs or Celtics. Instead of doing any of those things, Durant decided to sign with the Golden State Warriors, the same team that eliminated him in the playoffs last season and the same team that broke the regular season record for most wins in a season. And this move right here, while eventually paying off in terms of winning awards, made him a villain in the eyes of NBA fans. For a team like the Warriors that already had the unanimous MVP Steph Curry, the Defensive Player of the Year Draymond Green, and one of the 5 best shooters ever in Klay Thompson, to add Kevin Durant just felt unfair to many NBA fans. And as a result, many people still view him as a villain, as someone who ran away from the quote-unquote right way and basically signed on to a team that was guaranteed a title. And for 2 straight seasons, no team was a match for the overwhelming star power the Warriors had, as they cruised to back-to-back titles and Durant won back-to-back Finals MVPs. And for these 2 seasons, everything that Durant always wanted finally came true. He finally got that title that eluded him in OKC. He was finally viewed as the best player in the world. And if everyone on this team stayed healthy, there wasn't going to be anyone that could stop them for the foreseeable future. But because Durant was viewed as a villain, he didn't get the same treatment other players got when they were the best player in the world. Because for these 2 years that Durant was the best player in the world, there was a bigger storyline in the NBA that overshadowed his greatness. And ironically, these storylines were from 2 of the most prominent figures in Durant's past. In 2017, it was Russell Westbrook becoming the first player since Oscar Robertson in the early 60s to average a triple-double. And in 2018, it was LeBron putting up arguably one of his top 3 seasons ever to drag a talentless Cavs team to the NBA Finals. It's honestly stunning how nobody talks about the version of 2017 KD we had, as that was one of the best versions of Durant we've ever seen. But because he was the villain and still to this day is respected by many for the Golden State signing, nobody seems to care. But what people truly cared about was watching the Golden State Warriors crumble. They wanted a team that could end this dynasty once and for all. And with Durant's contract coming up in the 2018-2019 season, and the tensions rising between him and Draymond in the Warriors locker room, this would be the year to beat them. Enter the 2019 Toronto Raptors, whose past playoff woes forced them to trade their franchise's all-time leading scorer DeMar DeRozan for 1 year of Kawhi Leonard, who was practically an unknown because he hadn't played much the previous 2 seasons. So finally, it looked like a team out east could compete with the Warriors. But unfortunately, we would never get to see a fully healthy matchup between these 2 teams, as Durant would miss the majority of the playoffs and the first 4 games of the NBA Finals series against the Raptors with what was described as a calf strain. Durant returned for Game 5, looking to bring the Warriors back after falling down 3-1 to Toronto, but early in the second quarter, after going for a drive on Serge Ibaka, Kevin Durant tore his Achilles. And with injuries to Klay Thompson and many other role players on this team, the Warriors were no match to Toronto and lost the NBA Finals in 6 games. And with that, Durant's contract was up and he was free to go wherever he wanted. And he could have easily gone anywhere in the NBA if he wanted to, of course with the caveat that he would sit out a year due to his Achilles injury. And at this point, we all knew he was gone from the Warriors, mainly for 2 reasons. The first was of course the locker room tensions with Draymond, something we still don't know the full story on. But secondly, and this is just what I think, so bear with me here, but I think Durant wanted to be the number 1 guy for a city and bring that city a title. There are 28 teams in the league that KD could have gone to and been the big star. But the 2 stars he would never overtake was LeBron on whatever team he was on and Steph Curry on the Warriors. It just always felt like it was Curry's team, despite KD being the best player in the world while he was on Golden State. I think that bothered KD, that he could never get that respect from Warriors fans. So in the summer of 2019, Durant decided to facilitate a sign and trade between him, the Warriors, and the Brooklyn Nets, sending himself to Brooklyn for D'Angelo Russell. And strangely enough, this trade would actually grant Golden State a title before KD, as Russell was later flipped for Andrew Wiggins, who became an All-Star and the second best player on the Warriors' 2022 title team. But in KD's world, he was now the king of Brooklyn, and alongside him was Kyrie Irving and a really solid young core. Durant was, as I mentioned earlier, out for the entire 2019-2020 season, but the Nets were still solid, finishing as a 7th seed in the East before getting swept by Toronto. But luckily for them, Durant would come back and be fully healthy for the 2020-2021 season. There were just 2 major problems. Number 1 was that for some reason, KD and Kyrie wanted to fire head coach Kenny Atkinson, who had done a phenomenal job with the Nets the previous 2 seasons, just so they could hire Steve Nash, who, don't get me wrong, has a great basketball mind, but had never coached a game of professional basketball. And secondly, KD and Kyrie wanted to add some more star power to their team, so they traded away those solid pieces like Jared Allen and Karis LeVert to add James Harden. So now, the Nets went from a team with 2 great stars and solid depth to a classic 3-star and no-depth team, which has only worked out 1 time in NBA history, and that was with one of the greatest players of all time leading the charge. So how would this team look with post-Achilles injury Durant and all the craziness that surrounds Harden and Kyrie? Well, when they all played, this team looked unstoppable. But that was only when they all played, as all three guys would be out for extended periods of time throughout this season. But even with that, they finished as the second seed in the East, quickly getting by the Celtics in the first round before heading into a matchup with the Milwaukee Bucks, headlined by Giannis Antetokounmpo. This was a back-and-forth series that made it to 7 games. But as I mentioned earlier, injuries constantly hampered this Nets team. So with Kyrie out of the series with a sprained ankle and James Harden limping around with a hamstring injury, it was all up to Durant to save the Nets. And for the last major what-if in Durant's career, Durant actually looked to have saved the Nets with a heroic turnaround jumper in the closing seconds of Game 7. But upon further review, Durant's foot just barely grazed the three-point line as he released a shot. So instead of winning the series outright, Durant would have to lead the Nets to an overtime victory. And despite his 48-point performance in Game 7, Giannis and the Bucks were just too much, and the Nets were bounced from the second round of the playoffs. So what if Durant got his foot behind the line and made that shot? Well, if you remember, the winner of this series would play the 5th seed Atlanta Hawks in the Eastern Conference Finals. And I think it's safe to say the Nets would win that series, especially considering the Bucks did, despite Giannis getting injured. Then, the Nets would move on to the NBA Finals and face the Phoenix Suns. I think this would be an extremely competitive series, but if Kyrie were fully healthy and playing by then, this is probably the Nets series to lose. So I think it's safe to say that if Durant got his foot behind the line, a lot would be different in the NBA. First of all, Durant would finally win a ring being the number 1 guy on the team. Secondly, we probably wouldn't have seen all the dramatics that came in Brooklyn the following seasons, as Harden and Kyrie couldn't have asked for much more than a ring. And finally, Giannis would have never gotten that finals win and would likely be seen by many as a playoff choker, someone who just couldn't get the job done in the big moments. But instead, Durant's foot was on the line, Giannis won a ring and became the best player in the league, and KD would be sent home once again by the eventual champs. Since this moment, Durant's career has felt like a blur. KD is statistically putting up the best numbers of his career at 35 years old, but with injuries taking away 10 to 20 games a season, and Durant having to adjust to a new culture in Phoenix, his story feels like it's nearing its end, even though he could realistically play effective basketball for many years to come. But to look into his future, you have to look into his past. And there, you'll find someone constantly scrutinized as a result of falling short in the playoffs. Someone villainized for doing something almost any other player in the league would have done. Someone disrespected, despite being one of the 3 best players in basketball for over a decade. And because of this, it feels like Durant still wants to prove something, but in reality, there's nothing left for KD to prove. He's already shown to the world the type of talent he is. He's already done things basketball players only dream of. It's going to be up to him and him alone to realize that his battle against the people who villainize him just isn't worth it. Thanks for watching, and remember to leave a like and subscribe for more NBA videos just like this one. I'm Julian with TalkBackSports, and I'll see you next time.